if you need all of it. And then I'll ask the members to ask questions if at all they have any questions. So you can start, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, once more, and good afternoon, honorable members. As you have outrightly said, honorable Chairperson, our Committee on Transport, Works and Supply, was tasked to look at heads 151, Ministry of Transport and Logistics, head 54, Ministry of Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, and indeed head 93, Office of the President, Northern Province. Chairperson, as you are aware, pursuant to Article 202 of the Constitution of Zambia, Chapter 1 of the Laws of Zambia, the 2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure were actually presented by the Honorable Minister of Finance for 2021, which was to the tune of 217.1 billion. Chairperson, in accordance with Standing Orders 166 of the National Assembly of Zambia, Standing Orders 2024, the estimates were referred to various committees for the detailed scrutiny and scrutinizing the three heads of expenditure. The committee held the meetings and interacted with witnesses of transport and logistics, infrastructure, housing and urban development, Office of the President, Northern Province, and indeed respective permanent secretaries, including selected grant-headed institutions and non-state actors. Chairperson, the committee's report highlights the findings and recommendations of the committee on each head. The report is in three parts. Part 1, Chairperson, presents the committee's findings and recommendations arising from the consideration of the budget estimates headed 51, Ministry of Transport and Logistics. Part 2 is for the head 54, Ministry of Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, and Part 3 is head 93, Office of the President, Northern Province. Head 51, Chairperson, Ministry of Transport and Logistics. This is the program 2115, Fund Allocation and Declining Target Output Indicator. The committee, Chairperson, notes that there has been an increment in the allocation of funds to program 2115 to address air, road, railway and maritime transport development from 388.2 million in 2024 to 396.5 million in 2025. However, the committee notes with concern that the number of target output indicators have dropped to 134 in 2025 from 168 in 2024, indicating more resource allocation for reduced deliverables. Chairperson, in view of this, the committee recommends that to ensure the efficient utilization of allocated resources to maximize deliverables, there should be no delays in the implementation of projects to avoid cost-push information pressures which are caused by delays in the procurement processes. The committee further recommends that disbursements of funds for projects that have been budgeted for should be done timely with streamlined procurement and project implementation processes. Chairperson, Head 54, Ministry of Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development. Inconsistent budget allocation to the ministry. The committee observes with concern that the budget allocation to the ministry has been consistently reducing from 692 million in 2023 to 622 million in 2025, representing a reduction of about 30%. The committee chairperson therefore notes that this has resulted in the consequential reduction in funding for each of the 4 priority programs. The committee recommends an increase in the ministry's budget allocation in subsequent budgets as the observed deduction will impair the execution of programs under its mandate. Allocation of funds for backlog of infrastructure development. Chairperson, the committee notes that the backlog of infrastructure development may not be completed in any single budget. Allocation and further delayments would not only add to further dilapidation of incompleted infrastructures, but it will also lead to escalation of costs. In view of this, the committee recommends that the government considers budget variations to address a backlog of uncompleted projects in infrastructure projects in new districts amounting to 2.5 billion since 2014. The committee therefore recommends the variation and allocation of 782 million for 2025, 750 million for 2026, and 966 million for 2027 for pending projects from the new earmarked projects. Chairperson on Head 93, Office of the President, Northern Province. Timely and full release of funds. The committee observes that disbursements of funds were mainly released in parts rather than in full, causing delays in project implementations. The committee urges the government, through the Ministry of Finance and National Planning, to ensure timely and full disbursement of funds, and as this will enable better planning, execution, and completion of ongoing programs without delays. That can escalate costs and impact program outcomes. Chairperson on Provincial Autonomy in Contract Management. The committee observed that the provincial administration lacks control over contracts entered into by the central government, thereby limiting their ability to manage projects effectively. In view of this, the committee recommends that the provincial administration is given more autonomy to oversee and manage contracts in the province. Further decentralizing contract management will allow the province to closely monitor the progress of projects, and enforce accountability on contracts. Chairperson, I want to sincerely thank you for the opportunity to present this report on behalf of the committee. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you for that submission, Chairperson. Any questions? Honorable Mabumba and then Honorable Mukosa. Your mic.
Chair, maybe on this should be to do with the Minister of Infrastructure, I guess. Page 17 of their recommendation, Chairman, where they are saying allocation of funds for backlog of infrastructure development. I truly concur with their proposal, Honorable Chair, but what I wanted to find out is that the proposal that they have given in terms of figures on page 16, Honorable Chibuye, where you are saying in the budget for 2025 we need something like 782 million 750 and 968 for 2027. Did you have a conversation with the respective ministry and maybe the other witnesses as to whether this particular proposal they bought into it, with a view that obviously, like you have stated, much of this backlog of infrastructure, if we are not allocating funds, they will not be finished. But even if we are allocating smaller monies, at least we'll go a long way. So in terms of their response, what response did you get from the portfolio ministries on this particular proposal, which I feel, in my view, Honorable Chair, is the only way to go? I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair. Honorable Mukosa Mike.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mabumba, for that question. Honorable Chair, allow me to ask my colleague also to say something.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee on expanded budget. The question to do with the budgetary figure of 782, which is a shortfall, was actually brought to the committee for an increase in the budget allocation. Increase meaning what the ministry was expecting. There was a shortfall of this amount. So we actually interrogated quite a number of witnesses that came before our committee. And most of them, in fact all of them, were of the view that if at all this money was not allocated to the respective committee, to the respective ministry, it was going to impact on the execution of the mandate for the ministry. So yes, this is very, very important that this amount, 782 million, is actually allocated to the ministry for smooth operation of the ministry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
The question, just to add on, indeed, as the question has been posed, the stakeholders were engaged, and this was actually agreed, and this was the foresight of the ministry that once these amounts the projection of these amounts are allocated in the coming budgets, it will sufficiently help to execute the programs. So to answer the question, Honorable Mawumba, yes, we had engaged the stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mukoza.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Vice Chair, I take note that under head 51, that is for Ministry of Transport and Logistics, you have made an observation on lack of funding for office accommodation, where you have indicated that the Civil Aviation Authority does not have its own permanent officer structure, an issue that negatively affects the operational efficiency of the Civil Aviation Authority. And in this regard, you made a recommendation that part of the 790 million kwacha, which was allocated for airport infrastructure in the 2025 national budget, be extended to the Civil Aviation Authority to acquire or construct a permanent office structure. I would like to find out from you, during the interactions that you had with your witnesses, in line with this recommendation you've made, what did they say as to how the implementation of the desire to finance airport infrastructure construction will be affected? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair, can you respond to that?
Thank you. You've made a recommendation that from the 790 million kwacha that is meant for airport infrastructure, part of page 9 of the report that we have, you can go to
Lack of
observation and
funding.
recommendation number 6.
Number 6. You can ask your question.
So, are we together, Vice Chair?
Yes.
Okay, so your committee has made the recommendation that portion of the 790 million kwacha for airport infrastructure funds in the 2025 budget be extended to the Civil Aviation Authority to acquire or construct a permanent office structure. Now, my point is that what this basically means is that the money that was allocated to airport infrastructure should reduce so that we acquire a permanent structure for the Civil Aviation Authority. So I am asking that if that reduction is effected, what will be the impact on the construction of the airport infrastructure? When you are interacting with the witnesses, what did they say about this issue? Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kalole Mukosa, for that question. Indeed, this amount of money was allocated to the improvement of the airport infrastructure, but it was observed during the interaction that there was a very, very big component that was lacking, and that was the office space for the civil aviation. And when we were interacting with them, it came out clearly from them that it was going to be cheaper actually for them to get part of the monies and secure their own permanent offices and furniture, unlike what is obtaining as at now. Meaning, when we went through, it was crystal clear that the money that might come out of the 750 million, is it 790 million, was not going to very, very much affect the operations or the funding of the airport infrastructure. If that was the case, it was going to come out so that we could have looked for a variation of funds from somewhere. But we looked at the 790 million kwacha, which was for the airports, and realized with them, of course we interrogated them on that point, where they said indeed even if we were to take a portion of this amount, it was not going to affect heavily on the infrastructure development of the airports.
Thank you. Honorable Simunji. Your mic, Honorable. No, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. My question is related to Honorable Mavumba's question, where there are some projects in new recreated districts have stalled. As far as I'm concerned, these are projects where contractors were awarded contracts to construct infrastructure in these districts. The contractors either they did the works and left the works midway, or they got the money and they never did any works. When you were interacting with the witnesses, did you find out what they are likely to do with the contractors who took up the jobs and never completed the works, or got the money without doing any works before you go to variations in future years? Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can respond to that. Then
thank you very much, Honorable Member. Indeed, it was quite a heavy discussion in terms of contracts which were awarded. Of course, some monies were paid to some contractors in terms of advance payments, which were actually attached with performance bonds. And of course, some contractors performed and they were paid to a certain extent. Now, the problem is that as we were interacting, the issue mostly was coming from funding. Contractors were on site, but funding was erratic. And as such, some contractors could not continue being on the sites. So what we are saying is, if these funds were actually given, it will alleviate, one, to reduce the costs of doing these contracts, and also probably even avoid litigations, because the major issue, Honorable Member, Honorable Chair, was the issue of funding, which was so erratic. And as we are speaking, some of the contracts which were above 80% were said the same contractors must be must have the government must renegotiate with them so that they can complete these projects. Other projects, as we are speaking, we were told could even be taking litigation stances. So what we are saying is, if these funds that has been proposed were unveiled, it will help government to ensure that projects are completed on time, and of course even that autonomy to ensure that the supervision is actually given to the away from the central government to the provincial administration who are closer to these projects.
Thank you. Honorable Mavumba.
Chair, again, the committee on page 2, on page 2 of their submission on point 2.4.2. Let's go, Honorable Sweet. 2.4.2. They allude to the fact that, the Chair, there has been money which has been allocated to the railway infrastructure, 155 million. 155 million. But Chair, when you look at that money, and in Zambia we have got two major railways, that's Zambia Railways and the Tanzania Zambia Railway Authority. But when you look, Chair, at the allocation, that allocation is not sufficient enough. What I want to bring to the attention of the committee chair, and on page 8 of their recommendation, they are saying renovating railway infrastructure in Zambia. Of course, they recognize that money has been allocated, but what they are saying is that the government has to provide timelines. Honorable Chibuya, that money is not sufficient enough. In your conversation with the portfolio ministry, did you ask them, for example, right now the government on the rehabilitation of major roads, they are using the PP model. And I'm sure PP model can also work on the railway sector. Did you, in your conversation, did you ask the ministry as to what extent have they gone to attract private sector capital into our railway sector? Because government alone may not be able to manage, because the capital that is required goes beyond the 155 million that has been allocated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You can respond to that question, Vice Chair.
Thank you. You want to take it? Chair, allow me through you to ask my colleague to take that one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, indeed, we did interrogate our witness on the aspect that we have mentioned, Honorable. And looking at the limited resource envelope, which is actually allocated to this ministry, the 155 that has been put aside is basically to look at rehabilitating the rail works. Anything to do with coming up with new railways in Zambia. The government is actually collaborating with other governments, especially China. As we are aware, the president undertook a trip to China where they went to lure or attract foreign investors to come through and undertake construction of new rail lines. We've looked at Tanzania. They've come up with modern rail lines, and that's what we need in this particular country. So this particular amount of 155 million is basically just to rehabilitate the dilapidated infrastructure in terms of the rail in Zambia. But otherwise, the PP model, the government is aware that we don't have enough capacity to put up a new rail, and this is why the government, the president is all over in foreign countries trying to sell this idea to other countries to come through and be able to assist us so that we can put up new infrastructure in terms of rail and moving on roads. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, just to add on what my honorable colleague has said to answer Honorable Mabumba's question, and we appreciate for that question. Indeed, we realize also that the 155 million was just actually so portly for lead to tackle the railway infrastructure, just that is actually so dilapidated to as of now, which is actually even restricting the movement of the trains. I'm sure we are doing the same 60 kilometers per hour. And when the committee interacted with the minister and the permanent secretary, it was put clear to them that it is important that while the same Minister of Infrastructure is trying to put up new road infrastructure, it was important that the ministry should look at alternatives, should look at solutions to ensure that the railway lines is actually improved so that we can remove the load from the road onto the rail. So indeed, the committee also were aware and showed concern on the money, but as my colleague has said, that was for sport improvements. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Page number 7 of your report, 2.9, under your committee's observation and recommendations. The first one there says the committee, I think it's a housekeeping issue in terms of the numbers. We are saying that the committee notes that there has been progressive increments in the allocation of funds to the program 2115 to address air, road, rail, and maritime transport development from 396.5 million in 2024 to 388.2 million in 2025. Your comment?
Honorable Chair, my sincere apology. That was a serious typo.
Yeah.
It's the other way around.
Okay.
It's actually increasing from the 388 to 396. So I beg the committee to just make that correction.
Okay.
It's the other way around, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of members, any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. Vice Chairperson of the committee and your member there, Honorable Munega, thank you very much for appearing before this committee and for your submissions. We are consolidating this as we meet the Minister of Finance and National Planning, and your submission will be also considered. Thank you for coming and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Chair. We wish you well as you pass through this to consolidate the reports, and we also wish you a happy Diamond Jubilee.
Thank you. Same to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.